Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang para pendengar podcast KPK, Kongkow Pesantren Kebangsaan. Di dalam podcast ini hadir bersama kita, ya. Mohon maaf saya menggunakan bahasa Inggris, ya. We in this podcast we have Professor Stephane-Lacroix. I don't know, Lacroix or Lacroix. I'm sorry if I'm pronounce your name not correctly, but he is from France, from Sciences Pro University, one of the prestigious university in the world, one of the best university in the world, and he has specialty on Islamic studies as well as the political science as well. And a little background about this podcast, Professor Stephane. This is podcast produced by Pondok Pesantren Kebangsaan. I think you have heard this pesantren, which is the combination between Islamic values and nationalistic values. So the student can learn about not Islamic side of the study, but also the nationalistic one. So they became like nationalistic religion, something like that. Yeah, like Islamic based on Indonesian values. Yeah. So I think this is your third time, talk today. I'm sorry if we interrupt you for many times, for talking. From the first place, you talk about the contemporary debates. I didn't follow your talk until the finish. I left because I have something to do, and also the youth. You have met the youth representation in Semarang, and maybe based on your two experiences in the morning, and also the meeting with the youth representation. So, first of all, maybe you can introduce yourself and then explain what is your view on Islam in Indonesia, maybe in Southeast Asia, particularly after you talk in the morning and meeting with the youth representation. Thank you, Prof. Stephane. Please.
Thank you very much for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Stephane-Lacroix.
Yes.
I'm a professor of political science at Sciences Pro. Sorry, it's very difficult to pronounce French because, as I was saying before, there's letters that we write and we don't say. So there's an X at the end that we don't pronounce. OI is pronounced wa, which is also very French. So sorry for that. So I'm an associate professor of political science at Sciences Po. We have a very broad conception of political science in France. So political science for us includes sociology, anthropology, sometimes going into history. And so what I really do is that I'm a sociologist, and what I call a political sociologist, right? And I work on religion. So to make it very complicated, I could say I'm a political sociologist of religion. This is the kind of work I do, and I've been working on the Middle East for the last 20 years. So I got my PhD in 2007, so 18 years ago. So it's a bit more than 20 years if I take into account all my studies and then becoming a professor in 2009. So I've been a professor now for 15 years. I work on the Middle East, and I've worked especially on Saudi Arabia and Egypt, always looking at questions related to religion and politics in both cases. And I've been especially interested in looking at how conceptions and practices transform, like conception of the faith, but also practices transform over time. Why people adopt certain practices or certain beliefs which they consider to be orthodox, while a few decades ago this was not the case. So what is the norm, the normative understanding of religion, how it transforms over time. So this has really kind of been the thread through my work. My last book is coming out in a few months in English on Egypt, and it is about the Salafi movement in Egypt. And it's called Twilight of the Saints, So Twilight of the Saints, pronounce it clearly. And the subtitle is The History and Politics of Salafism in Contemporary Egypt. And it kind of looks at the last 100 years of Egyptian history, religious history, and how certain conceptions of Islam that one might think of as Salafi became increasingly mainstream in Egypt. And the idea is to try to understand why this happened and to avoid easy explanations and to try to kind of reconstitute the bigger picture of what makes certain religious conceptions orthodox in the eyes of those who follow them, and why conceptions of orthodoxy change over time. So this is really what I'm trying to do in this book. When it comes to your second question, Southeast Asia is new to me still. I'm on sabbatical this year. And so I have this year sabbatical at Sciences Pro. We have like every 7 years, 1 year of no teaching, where we can devote ourselves to research, exploring new projects. And so I decided to seize the opportunity to try to expand my comparative horizons beyond the Arab countries that I've been studying until now. And I've always been interested in Indonesia, because Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country. It is a country that I've always heard very good things about, so I was very interested in seeing it. And also, I had a few friends here from before that I met at conferences, scholars from Indonesia, who encouraged me and said, you should come. And so I got invited as a visiting professor in Jakarta at Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia. So I'm a visiting professor there for the year. And that is the opportunity for me to learn new things, and especially to be challenged in my assumptions. Because that's what my friends told me, those who know Indonesia. They said, if you want to be challenged in your conceptions about religion, go to Indonesia, because it is both the biggest Muslim majority country in the world, but it is also one that has sometimes different understandings of the religion than the one you've got used to in the Arab world. So I was interested in going through that experience. And the idea at the end is to kind of, expand, as I said, my comparative horizons, that is, maybe produce some kind of comparative work that would put the Arab world into conversation with Indonesia. Because I feel that studies of contemporary Islam have always had some kind of Arab-centric bias. That is, and that's an old thing that goes back to the kind of, in a way, to the colonial period, right? When Islam was always associated in people's minds to the Arab world. And so whatever was written about Islam was always written from the perspective of the Arabs. And at this point, I mean, although the Arab world is very important and very dear to my heart, I spent many years of my life there, and I also love this part of the world. But I sometimes feel that a lot of us who work on the Arab world, and especially in Europe, where the Arab world is much closer to us, it's the neighbors, and we know each other very well. And so we tend to forget that the majority of Muslims today are in Asia. And so the center of gravity of Islam is now in Asia, somewhere between Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, and Malaysia. And so I was interested in, again, opening up my comparative horizons through learning more about Indonesia, through learning the language, so it's kind of the beginning of a project, in a sense, right? I'm using this year to kind of lay the ground for future research on Indonesia. That's really what I'm trying to do. To finish on the perceptions, I mean, for instance, now we're at the Pesantren. I don't know of any similar institution in the Arab world. So this is very interesting because it's a very Indonesian institution, right? I mean, you have, and sometimes people here, they say ma'had. I've seen that when they want to translate Pesantren in Arabic. But the ma'ahid in the Arab world are a bit different. I mean, in Egypt, for instance, you have ma'ahid who are connected to Al-Azhar. But they're like all part of one institution. It's very centralized. Here you have a lot of different pesantren. It's very decentralized, very different ways of teaching. I mean, the whole phenomenon of the pesantren is extremely diverse, right? From what I understand, from very conservative, traditionalist pesantren to very modernist ones, and you have everything in between. Different ages, those who are for smaller children, those who are for university students like here. So this is one of the things that I found very, very interesting and very unique to Southeast Asia. So yeah, I've been very, very interested, very impressed also by the people I meet. This is a few times I've been to Pesantren with students who speak very good English, which is also very interesting in itself, I think. It says something about the type of education, which is, of course, rooted in Islam, but also open to different forms of knowledge. So, this continues to make me more interested in Indonesia.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Stephane. I mean, I'm impressed with your, I'm quite impressed with your knowledge about the Islam, specifically in Indonesia, because I think this is your first time here. You mentioned this is the first time, or previously you visited Indonesia before?
I mean, I've been here for 6 months.
Oh, 6 months. Okay.
So yeah, I've had time to be here and meet a lot of people, and I'm at UI Tiga in Jakarta with a lot of wonderful colleagues who introduced me to people. So I've been very lucky to be very well. I mean, I think anyone who comes to Indonesia is very well received anyway. But I was especially lucky because I was especially well received, right? I had a lot of very supportive people who were really willing to introduce me to Indonesian society, to Indonesian culture. I also spent time in Jogja learning Indonesian. And Jogja is a great place to get to know Indonesian, I mean, mostly Javanese, but still Indonesian culture as well. So yeah, it's been a very, very rich experience. It's been 6 wonderful months, really.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. I mean, you mentioned about the differences between pesantren and mahat as well, and you also, Professor Stephane also realized that the differences Islam in Indonesia as well. I think you mentioned about Islam before colonialization, because there is Islamic in before that came from the trade merchant, also education right now. So have you heard about that from like Islamic kejawen, something like that? Have you heard about the ritual that might be different with the Arabic side, like people visiting graveyard to pray, something like that? Have you experienced that before in here?
I mean, look, there's different things. Sufism has traditionally been a very adaptive understanding of Islam. And I think, and this is not me speaking, but a lot of scholars who have worked about this. I think what allowed Islam to spread so quickly during the first centuries of the religion was Sufism, especially after the 9th century, because Sufism had an extraordinary ability to mold itself on local cultures, to absorb them, to Islamicize them while keeping them. So Sufism was always a form of Islam that kind of, let people keep their identity while becoming Muslims. And so that kind of allowed Islam to take root in Central Asia, in what was India, and now it's India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, in Indonesia, of course, right? So I think, and this is something that you see across the Muslim world, like on the boundaries of the Muslim world are always where you find the Sufis. In Africa, Sufis. In countries like Morocco, who are also on the edge, very strong Sufi culture. So Sufism was, I think, key to the expansion of Islam because of that very adaptive ability of Sufism. And so, of course, in Indonesia, when Islam came, it came through a Sufi culture, right? Because it came from Yemen, and well, it didn't come only from Yemen, from other places, at a time when Sufism was very strong there, and so it was kind of brought to Indonesia through that Sufi culture, and that Sufi culture was able to integrate many of these pre-existing beliefs by not rejecting them outright, but redesigning them in a way that would make them Islamically acceptable, so that people could still feel that they were remaining what they were, that they were keeping their identity while adopting a new religion. And so, so I think Indonesia is a very interesting case of that. And in a sense, I mean, that's the greatest break today with, more fundamentalist groups who kind of reject that type of adaptability, who imagine pure kind of utopian vision of Puritan, because that actually doesn't work, right? That Puritanism is actually something that doesn't allow for this kind of adaptability that I mentioned. So, but this is a very new phenomenon. Islam was very adaptable in the past, and that adaptability was very much the reason why it became so quickly a world religion. There was another thing I wanted to say. I was saying too many things, but I'll leave it there for now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Then we would like to know your opinion about when Islam came. Based on, I think you have read many literatures maybe about Indonesia, particularly Islam Indonesia, and you came here for 6 months right now. Yeah, comes from here, and how you see, like, is it represented from the research studies before, and about the moderation in Islam Indonesia, also the youth, you have met the youth. Is it represented, or is it way from the what have written in the studies after you see Indonesia?
I mean, right? Look, I'm not yet a specialist of Indonesia, so I'm still having early impressions. I came after, the books I read were like, when I came, I knew about, of course, I had read Clifford Geertz, I had read Robert Hefner, very important, right, and his understanding of civil Islam. Yeah. And I found a lot of that. Yeah, that confirmed a lot of what I thought. I mean, what I read. I found it very lively on the ground. I think that Pancasila is a wonderful idea. And I know that you, in this Pesantren, you are very attached to Pancasila, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Because, I was saying this earlier this morning, I think, Indonesia should influence the Arab world a bit more. Usually it happens the other way around. But when I think of a country like Syria today, in Syria today, you have a situation that is a bit like Indonesia. That is, you have a Sunni Muslim majority, and then you have a lot of minority groups. Many Christian groups, about 10% of the population of various denominations of Christians. You have 10% who are Alawis, which is a separate group as well, that was once Shia, but today is also quite far away from the mainstream Shia. You have Druze, you have Ismailis, another branch of the Shia. So you have all these different groups living on one territory. For a very long time, the regime in Syria was led by the Alawis. The Al-Assad family were Alawis. So it was a minority that was ruling the country. And it used very much that thing of protecting minorities to stay in power. But now the situation has changed. The regime has fallen, and now you have the Muslim majority, the Sunni Muslim majority has taken power. And now they're trying to find ways to reassure the minorities. Because now the minorities are afraid that the majority will try to impose the will of the majority over the minority. And they're looking for ways to tell the minorities, don't worry, it will be fine with us. And I think Pancasila is a great way to make the minorities feel secure by making it constitutional, by giving them official recognition that gives them the feeling that first they're as part of the nation as everyone else, and their rights are as constitutionally protected as everyone else's. I mean, Pancasila, I know, is more than just a religious question, but it's one of the 5 questions of Pancasila. And for students of religion like me, it's the one that we always think about. But of course, I know there are other parts of Pancasila. But that is what a country like Syria needs today. A principle that allows the Sunni Muslim majority to give some form of formal recognition to the minorities that reassures them. Because if it doesn't work that way, those minorities will try to destabilize the country again, and Syria, which is coming out of 15 years of war, will go into 15 more years. Yeah. So, for instance, this is one of the things I found extremely interesting, and I think very unique to Indonesia. So again, I really think that Indonesia should influence sometimes the Arab world and not simply receive influences from the Arab world.
Yeah. Okay, Prof. Stephane. I mean, this is not for the listeners learning. I'm learning as well. Okay. Because of time being, I'm really sorry, but we hope we can contact you in the future or in the near future. But maybe for the closing, Prof. Stephane, I think you mentioned a lot, but I'm amazed with your knowledge, and you only spend around 6 months right now, but you have so many findings and
very little. I hope to have more.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is for closing, Prof. Stephane. Do you have message for scholars, for researchers, for youth people, young scholars, or maybe those who studied Islam, in particular in Indonesia or Southeast Asia, to contribute to the study? I mean, the potential studies or something like that, encouragement to...
Yes, one of the things I really enjoyed here is that, I mean, in my field, that is in the field of the sociology and the anthropology of Islam, you have a lot of great scholars here in Indonesia. Like in the universities, I have a lot of colleagues who are really, really very good scholars, very knowledgeable, with whom I've had a lot of pleasure talking. So I think Indonesia has a very strong potential in that field. And I think, it's important also for the country itself, because those are questions that I think many of the Indonesians are asking to themselves. That thinking about that relationship between their religion and their various cultures, and how to reconcile all of this while being faithful to themselves. So I think those studies are really needed. I think you have a great potential to conduct those types of studies. I would really encourage students to get into that field. And I think there's so much you can learn from studying Indonesia. That question of, I mentioned that this morning, and maybe we'll say just one word about that. I think that the relationship between religion and culture is a big, big question, right? And I think the Indonesian case is a really interesting one, because that relationship, when you can see with all the groups that exist in Indonesia, with all the big Islamic associations, different takes on how to link religion to culture, right? Different approaches to that question. And I think throughout the Islamic world, the same question is asked. Except that in Indonesia, it's actually openly asked, and people actually openly discuss it. So that's one more thing that I think is really, really, really precious in the study of Indonesia. Please, we need more scholars of those things. I think it's important. We need more comparative work also. People who study Indonesia, but also keep an eye on the other countries, to try to also not simply be studying the case study, but also able to kind of think in a more paradigmatic way. There's enormous potential, I'm sure, and I encourage students to go forth.
Maybe go to Sciences Pro as well to learn.
We are happy to receive them. Yeah. Please come.
Yeah, okay. That is young scholars, especially in this pesantren, maybe listeners of KPK, Kongkow Pesantren Kebangsaan. As mentioned by Professor Stephane, he encouraged you to nurture the Islamic studies, particularly on the relationship between religion and culture, and as well as an opportunity to visit Sciences Pro as well to learn Islam. Thank you very much, Professor Stephane-Lacroix. Lacroix. Sorry, I am pronounced well now. Lacroix from Sciences Po University. Thank you very much, listeners, and please join our later on episodes on talking about many different fields of academic, including social, political, economics. Thank you very much for your attention and listen for it. Thank you very much, Professor Stephane-Lacroix.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So goodbye. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.